Steve here. It's the show where I answer your questions. And this week, my first question comes from Bruce Bartup. I just had to ask, what the heck is with America? Seriously. In one of the tightest and most hard-fought and important elections in Virginia, a single vote decided a district, which decided the majority in the assembly, which means that voter suppression and so much more becomes a real target. That's momentous, historical. I watched the pundits on that election. They were praising the electorate because turnout was at an all-time high, 44%. From a UK perspective, that is incredibly low. And that is not to say our politics is clean or fragrant. Our deputy prime minister just resigned over keeping porn on his work computer and lying about it, and for creeping on interns. So what gives? Oh, it's just the usual American tendency to want to bask in our greatness without having to actually do anything to validate that feeling. Yeah, you're right. The voter turnout in the Alabama special election, where Doug Jones defeated Roy Moore, was also unusually high, but even it was in the 40s as well, 40-something%, but it was considered like surprisingly high. I think part of it is that one half of our two-party system here in the United States, the Republican Party, does everything it possibly can to keep voter turnout low. And when voter turnout is relatively low, Republicans tend to win. When voter turnout is relatively high, then Democrats tend to win. So Republicans try to keep voter turnout low, and they do that through all kinds of methods of voter suppression. They try to make it as difficult as possible for people in parts of the district or people who belong to certain demographics that tend statistically to vote more for Democrats than Republicans. They try to make it as difficult as possible for those people to vote. They close down voter registration sites. They limit the number of polling places. They curtail the number of hours that polling places in those areas are open. They do all kinds of things. They introduce voter ID laws, which make it more difficult for people in lower income levels to vote, which predominantly they tend to break more Democrat than Republican. It makes it more difficult for them to vote. They just try to keep turnout as low as possible, and that's a big part of it. But another big part of it is that there's just a lot of apathy and lack of civic engagement, lack of interest in politics, and that crosses all party lines and all ideological lines. That's something that Republicans, Democrats, liberals, conservatives, people on the right, people on the left, everywhere in between, every group suffers from that. There is an attitude that is pervasive that participating in the political system is pointless. That it doesn't matter who you vote for, that every candidate is just as bad as every other candidate, that your vote doesn't count, that even if you win a victory, it will only be temporary, everything that you gain will be taken from you, that when people ask for your vote, they're only interested in winning, they're just telling you what you want to hear so that you'll vote for them, and then if they win, they won't actually implement anything that they say they will. Politicians lie, you can't trust them, and all of that just leaves a lot of people with the feeling that it's just not worth it, that it's a sucker's game, that voter turnout is low because most people just don't see the point. Even people who could vote without hardship, people who are not affected by voter suppression policies, people who could very easily vote, often don't because they don't see the point. They don't think that the result of the election will make any kind of a difference in their lives, and that's just the way it is. And that is the toughest thing to overcome, because you can win a Democratic majority, let's say, in a state legislature or Congress, or win back the presidency or the governorship, and you can implement more progressive policies. You can do away with policies that lead to voter suppression. You can redraw districts. You can set new operating hours. You can set new rules for polling places and how elections are conducted. You can fix all of those things. And remove a lot of those barriers that have been artificially placed in the way of many people exercising their right to vote. But that apathy is something that is going to take a long time to erode. And I don't know if it's if it's even moving in the right direction. I mean, when a charismatic candidate comes up, like Obama or Bernie Sanders, you have a lot of people coming into the system that maybe wouldn't have otherwise and getting excited about voting. But often when that candidacy is over, when that person is no longer up there asking for their vote, their participation goes away again, you know. So yeah, that's, to me, voter apathy is a huge problem. That's why we would look at something like, oh wow, 44% turnout as, you know, shockingly high, when actually it should be embarrassingly low. We should be embarrassed that that's considered a high voter turnout in this country. Kaylee Berkwin, did you happen to see the video posted by Riley Dennis recently, suggesting potential changes to how YouTube and YouTubers can better manage harassment? What's your thoughts on that? Any additional suggestions? I don't really have anything to add to what Riley says in that video, because everything she says is either something I've thought of myself before or something that I now wish I had thought of because it's such a great idea. She covers it pretty well. Her main point of beefing up the block function on YouTube to make that just more useful to people, so that when you block someone, it doesn't just block them from leaving comments on your videos. It functions more like a block on Twitter or Facebook or some other social network, where it just cuts that person off from you. And that way they can't subscribe to your channel. They can't watch your videos if they're signed in under the blocked account. Their videos don't appear when other people watch your videos in the sidebar. Like that is all just common sense stuff that I think YouTube should have implemented years ago. And I think it's all a great suggestion. I would love for someone at YouTube to watch Riley's video and say, oh yeah, actually those are great ideas, and we have the ability to implement these right now. Why don't we just do this? Why don't we just make it just a lot more difficult to for people to use this platform to harass people? Actually, now that I think about it, there is one thing that actually YouTube used to have that I would totally take advantage of if they brought it back. And that is the ability to set a character limit for how long a comment on one of your videos can be. That doesn't necessarily cut down on harassment per se, but it does make comments it would make comments a lot easier to manage, because people wouldn't be able to post like a book as a comment to your video. I think it would probably discourage people from posting comments that are not relevant to the subject of the video. So if that was available as an option, I would definitely turn that on and set a fairly short character limit for comments on my videos. But other than that, everything Riley says goes double for me. I think it was a great video. I think she's right on top of it. Her experience in terms of receiving a lot of harassment has been very similar to mine, and similar to those of a lot of other people who have been targeted by people who do the kinds of things that Riley describes in that video. They have channels that are built on making response videos that leech off of other people's content, that exploit other people's work, other people's original content, and just respond to it and get their fans angry about it and attack and demean and insult the person who made the original video. And before you know it, they've got hundreds of thousands of subscribers, because YouTube encourages and allows that sort of thing to happen. So what Riley says about beefing up the block feature, and YouTube just generally being a lot more serious and a lot more proactive about enforcing anti-harassment policies that it already has in place on paper, that would all be terrific. I think I am behind that 100% and in complete agreement with what Riley says about that. And Kaylee, you also asked another question. I didn't put it in my list here, but you wanted to know about my background here, because as you suggest, I may not be featuring it very much anymore, since I'm not going to do these videos anymore. And that background, as I have mentioned a couple times before, is a section of the Carina Nebula, and it's called Mystic Mountain. And that particular photograph was taken by the Hubble in 2010. But that is just a tiny, tiny section of a massive nebula called the Carina Nebula that is about 7,500 light years from Earth. Yeah, something like that. It varies. The estimates of it depend, because the thing is so huge itself. It's about 7,500 or so light years from Earth. And it's one of the largest nebula that has ever been observed. And it is, and you asked, is it married? Does it have children? Actually, yes, it does. It does have children. It has many, many star clusters that live within it that have presumably formed from the material as a part of this nebula. And one of its children, one of the stars that is visible inside the Carina Nebula, is called WR25. And it is significant because it is currently, we think, the most luminous star in the Milky Way galaxy. At least it's the most luminous star in the Milky Way galaxy that we have ever discovered, as we are able to measure luminosity in distant stars. So there you go. Yes, that's what it is. It's Mystic Mountain from the Carina Nebula, and it does have family. Lots of awesome stars that live within it, including possibly the most luminous star in the galaxy. Aren't you glad you asked? I am. Dr. Babylon, Steve, would you agree that the Electoral College has outlived its usefulness? Twice in my lifetime, 2000 and 2016, the Electoral College has given us a president who lost the popular vote. In 2016, the popular vote loser also happened to be an unqualified demagogue who takes the piss out of the Founding Fathers' rationale for why the people shouldn't be allowed to directly elect the president. Yeah, the Electoral College is a tough issue for me because in general, I lean toward getting rid of it. I agree with you that in cases where it thwarts the popular will, I think it's very tempting to just say, well, why do we even have it? Let's just get rid of it. There are compelling arguments as to why it should be kept, but the more I think about it, it's particularly in the aftermath, in the shadow of the 2016 election, the more I think I would be more comfortable getting rid of it. I'm not 100% on the yes, let's get rid of it side, but I'm more on that side than the other side. And, let's also remember that the whole reason the Electoral College exists in the first place is because it was added to the Constitution as a way of placating Southern slave-owning states. Because they were faced with a dilemma where if the president were elected by just straight popular vote, the Southerners were afraid that they would never have a president that represented them and their interests because the population of the North was just so much greater. So the popular vote would favor candidates that the North preferred over the South, or so they thought. And the only way that the South would be able to have a population count that was comparable to the North to counteract this concern would be if they recognized slaves as citizens and counted them among allowed them the right to vote and basically treated the slaves as people, as citizens. And of course, they were completely unwilling to do that. So we came up with the Electoral College, or we didn't. The Founding Fathers, the framers of the Constitution, came up with the Electoral College as a way of mitigating the disadvantages of the North's greater population. So yeah, the whole thing was created as a gift to slaveholding states. So when you think about it in that light as well, it's very tempting to just say, oh, fuck it. Get rid of it. We never should have had it in the first place. Yeah. Becca Hawkins, hi Steve, I'm glad that You Had to Ask is going to still be around in some form, emerging from its cocoon and transforming into the new live stream, per your metaphor, as this show on your channel has always been one of the few places on YouTube that I feel safe asking questions. My final question for You Had to Ask is this, perhaps because I'm now feeling nostalgic for You Had to Ask. Why do you think there's so much 80s nostalgia in media for our generation lately? I mean, I can understand romanticizing our generation's childhood, and there is an appeal for every generation to revisit times of their respective childhoods, but the 80s were the Reagan-Bush years, and they were also when there was a major AIDS epidemic going on. Do you think that despite the era of Trump going on now, the new generation growing up at this time will look back on this period of history with similar nostalgia 30 to 40 years from now? Oh, yes, of course they will. Yes, of course they will. I think that's just a natural thing. I mean, not everybody will, obviously, but enough of them will. Just like not everyone our age looks back fondly on the 80s, but enough of us do that it becomes a widespread sort of cultural thing. And it's romanticizing and idealizing your youth or idealizing a bygone era, taking the things from it that you remember fondly and downplaying the more negative parts. I think every generation does that when they reach a certain age, when the years of their childhood are far enough removed from them that they can look back on it with sort of rose-tinted glasses. I think that's what's happening with the 80s. For my parents, it was the 50s and the 60s. It was their formative years. And there were plenty of things about the 50s and 60s that should not be fondly remembered, but were nonetheless swept aside in their memories so they could remember all the good times and all the positive things and all the exciting things and all the things they wish were still here or still around or hadn't changed or whatever. And people will do that for this era as well, despite the the disgrace and the awfulness of Trump. I mean, people look back fondly on the 70s, and the 70s had the end of the Vietnam War, some of the worst years of the Vietnam War before it ended, and Nixon and Watergate and the fuel crisis and hostage takings and skyjackings. There were all kinds of things in the 70s that were just awful, that you would think, well, nobody's going to look back fondly on this, and people do. They look back fondly on, they minimize and forget about the bad stuff, and they accentuate the good stuff. They accentuate the positive. And that's what people do for the 80s. That's what people will do for this era in 30 or 40 years when people who are coming of age now look back on it. I think it's just human nature, for better or worse. It's just something that we do. Christian Gabriel. Hello, Steve. I just have a couple of questions I want to ask. Number one, why does feminism not yet integrate itself against mistreatment of women in places where there are more issues in gender inequality, unlike America, where the voice of feminism has been stronger than ever before? I'm not saying America is perfect, but there are worse places out there. Number two, what is your opinion on feminists that do not see your state of being a great ally to feminism? Those who say that men cannot be allies because they are men. Ah, yes, we couldn't quite close out. You had to ask without a question from a dude, presumably. I apologize if I'm mistaken there, Christian. I'm just assuming. A dude asking another dude about feminism. So, for the first question, why does feminism not integrate itself against mistreatment of women in places where there are more issues in gender inequality? Well, it does. I'm not sure where you get your information, but I assume, again, making an assumption. If I'm wrong, I'm wrong. But I assume you are referring to or suggesting the Middle East, Islamic parts of the world, regions where fundamentalist authoritarian forms of Islam that have very strict, what we would consider anachronistic, sort of backwards ideas about women and gender roles are the dominant religion. There is such a thing as feminists in Islamic countries. There is such a thing as feminism in the Middle East. Now, they can't operate quite as freely or as openly as they can in other parts of the world, but that doesn't mean that it's not there. In Iran, for example, there is a very long tradition, a very long-standing women's rights movement. There's a Facebook group based in Iran called My Stealthy Freedom that I have given shout-outs to in this series before, that is a women's rights organization that is devoted to empowering women and pushing back against the marginalization of women in Iran. And there are similar organizations and people throughout what we call the Islamic world. So to say that feminism doesn't exist there, or that feminists are not interested in helping women who suffer under patriarchy and marginalization and oppression in parts of the world where they have it even worse than they have it in the West, that's simply not true. And for your second question, what is my opinion on feminists who think I can't be an ally because I'm a man? I respect that. I think that they are completely entitled to feel that way. If they view men as agents of their oppression, which I think is true, we're not always, we are often unwitting in that role, but we nonetheless benefit greatly from a gender inequality that privileges men and underprivileges women as a general rule. If women feel that men should not be feminists, or that men should not be looked to as allies for feminists, I respect that. I would like to be thought of as a feminist ally, but if there are particular feminists who would rather not work with me, or rather not talk to me, or rather not hear what I have to say on a particular subject, I completely respect that. And I won't bother them. And if they have something to say to me, I will listen and take it in and regard it with respect. I don't know what else I can do. If I as a man want to help women and help combat gender inequality, then I can't force my help or force my opinion on women who aren't interested in it. They have every right to not be interested in what I have to say. And I respect that right. It's really not that complicated. Secular Scholar, hey Steve, how about singing or playing a farewell song to close out this final You Had to Ask? Boy, what a great idea, even though I'm a terrible singer, and you do me too much credit by suggesting that I play a farewell song. Like I can play an instrument. I could barely play a recorder in 6th grade. Yes, and I have the perfect song, and I will sing it at the end of this episode, but we're not quite there yet. First, we have a little thing to get through, which is something I like to call
the lightning round.
That's right, no lightning round, Bell. It's the last episode. I can break format if I want. Anyway, James Russell. I observe your beard getting a bit more gray like mine. Are you turning into me? For your sake, I hope not. Bad enough that I have to be myself without anyone else having to be me as well. Oh, the self-deprecation. I love that, James. Maybe you're turning into me. You ever think about that? No? That never occurred to you? Probably. It's probably neither one of those, honestly. Anyway, Brian Gibson, once you go to the live stream format, what will be the best method to pre-submit questions? Excellent question, and such a very helpful one. Thank you, Brian. Well, you can continue to submit questions actually the same way that you submit them to this series, which is to leave a comment on the previous episode of the live stream. I will be taking questions from there. And I'll, of course, prompt people at the end of the live stream, because the live stream, it'll be live and then it will be archived on my channel, so you can watch it anytime you want after the stream is over if you don't make it for the live stream. And you'll be able to leave a comment on that video, and you can leave a comment asking your question for the next live stream. I'll also be soliciting questions from people on Twitter and Facebook, and I just opened a Curious Cat account that people can leave questions on, and I'll give all this information out on the live stream when I tell people to leave me questions or whatever. So there will be, and Patreon patrons, of course, can submit questions, which I will be answering on the show as well. So there'll be lots of different ways for you to ask me questions pre-submitted in the live stream. But probably the easiest way will be just to do the same thing you do for this series, which is to leave a comment on the previous episode, which I will then be checking and collecting questions from before the next one. Scott Bresinger, rest in peace, you had to ask. Viva the live stream. My final question to you for this show is of deep importance. If you had to recast the original series of Star Trek using Stuffy and the gang, who would get which role? As far as I'm concerned, gender and species swapping are fine with me. Also, would you direct the imaginary film, or would you hold out for J.J. Abrams? I like JJ. I like JJ's Star Trek, but if I were going to pick someone else, I would want Nick Meyer to direct it, because he's my favorite Star Trek director. But I would direct it myself, because I'm an egomaniac, and they're my stuffed animals, damn it. Toby Benson would be Captain Kirk. Stuffy would be Spock. I think even though Spock is very emotionless, and Stuffy's very emotional, I think Stuffy is also quite rational. So Stuffy would be Spock. Prospector Jones would be Dr. McCoy. Let me see. Jack would be Scotty. Is that a little too on the nose? I hope not. That's how it is anyway. Let me see. Who would Millicent be? Wow. Millicent would have to, I don't know if she would work for one of the regular characters. She would have to be like an admiral or something that would come in and order them around. Squirrel could be Uhura. And Hans Krieger could be Sulu, because he's the only major role left. And Chekhov wouldn't be there. I would just get rid of him and have Lieutenant Eric's or something like in the animated series. Gwen No Fear, thanks for the shout out, Steve. My question for the final You Had to Ask, I'm looking forward to your Ask Away live stream, is what are the best or most memorable meals you've ever had? Oh, that's such a great question. I went to one of the few experiences I've ever had at going to a truly nice restaurant. I went many years ago with a girl I was dating at the time. This was long before I was with my wife, and we went to an actual nice restaurant where I had to take my hat off and everything. And I don't remember actually specifically what I got. I think it was pork something, and then I got creme brulee for dessert, and it was delicious. And I remember it because it's one of the only times I've ever been to an actual nice restaurant. I don't know what else. There was a really nice Italian place that my wife and I went to when we went on a small vacation a couple years ago. That was lovely. I remember Christmas dinner when I was maybe 11 or 12, not for the food, but because my father and my grandfather got into such a huge fight that Pap and Granny actually left in kind of a huff. And the fight was over me because I didn't clean my plate, and my father insisted that I clean my plate before I leave the table, and my grandfather wanted to take it easy on me, so that was memorable too. But yeah, when I think about it, it's kind of difficult. I guess I haven't had that many truly memorable meals, so I wish I had some better ones to remember for you, and I wish I had some better stories to tell leading off of those. Joshua Purvis. Hi, Steve. How are you today? My question is, if you could make a great WrestleMania matchup cards, what would it be? Thanks for answering my question. See, well, thank you for asking them, Joshua, and I hope if you're still interested, you'll continue to ask me questions for the live streams going forward. I'm not going to give you an entire card, but I'll give you my 2 WrestleMania main events. The Raw main event, if it were up to me, would be Brock Lesnar versus Samoa Joe, and Samoa Joe would go over and win the Universal title. And the SmackDown main event would be AJ Styles versus Shinsuke Nakamura. And that's kind of a pick'em for me. I would like to see Nakamura win the title, but if AJ won, that would not break my heart either. So those are my 2 dream main events for WrestleMania. I don't think either one of those is going to happen, although it's somewhat possible that they might do AJ versus Nakamura. Rotting in the Midwest, quick question. Will the new live stream question and answer thing have a lightning round? Possibly. I haven't made any firm decision on that yet, but I think it just might have a lightning round at some point, yes. Maybe I'll save the lightning round for when things are getting a little slow, and if there's enough people in the chat, I might declare, okay, lightning round, and people can just ask questions in a hurry, and I can answer as many of them as I can in like 5 minutes or something like that. I'm not sure, though. I'm not sure. Radical Bacon. Since Adi's main presence on this channel is going away, can we get occasional updates about her fatness and purring and general catitude in the live stream? Can you give us a gratuitous pussy shot now? Ooh, that's... It's going to be difficult, but yes, I think I can. I'll be right back. Did somebody ask for a gratuitous pussy shot? Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness. What do you think? Your presence was requested. That's my kitty. She'll still be around. Well, yes, I know. We'll still have updates on her general catitude, as you say. Yes, I appreciate that Adi is a very well-loved part of the channel, and she will remain. All right. Matt Machado. Hi, Steve. Since You Had to Ask is ending, at least in its current format, I think this question will be fitting, since hopefully it will be the last question. My question is, why did you have to ask? Okay, it will not be the last question, Matt, unfortunately, because a couple other people also wanted to have the last question, and I'm trying to deal with that in as fair a way as possible. But it'll be one of the last questions. And why did I have to ask? Because I wanted to know. Why did you have to ask? Because you wanted to know. And the best way to find out if you want to know something is to ask. Anyway, Patrick Dodds. Steve, could I ask the final You Had to Ask question? That being, as an atheist, what do you think is the meaning of life, if any? The meaning of life is whatever you make for yourself. That's one of the wonderful things about life, and I think that's one of the wonderful things about looking at life as an atheist. You don't have a meaning that is bestowed upon you by some higher power. Nobody tells you what life means. Nobody tells you what your life means. You can figure it out for yourself. And you can orient it toward whatever North Star you want. That, to me, is a wonderful thing about living in a universe and viewing the universe in such a way that there is no overarching authority telling you what your life is supposed to be, or what your life is supposed to mean, or what should be and shouldn't be important to you. Those are all things that you work out yourself through your own experience. As you live, you figure that stuff out. And your life means whatever it means to you. And nobody can tell you that it shouldn't mean that, or that it should mean this instead. That's not the way it works. So, yeah. But unfortunately, that will not be the last question for this version of You Had to Ask. The last question is this. Francois Lacombe. Hey, Steve. May I have the very last answer to the very last question asked on You Had to Ask, please? Yes. That was the last question. That's it for all of the questions. That's it for the lightning round. That's it for the whole shebang. It's time now for the final shout out. And the shout out this week goes to my friend Lady Columbia. And specifically to Lady Columbia's show, her live stream show that she hosts on her channel every couple of weeks or so, called Black by Any Means, where she is joined by two of my very favorite people in the world, FoxyJazzabelle and ElectricMayhem87, aka Ashleigh. And they talk about politics, they talk about what's going on in the news, they talk about nerdy stuff, they talk about all the things that you could possibly be interested in, and they share these things with you from their perspective, and they just so happen to be three awesome black women. And if there's any lesson that we, especially us white folks, should take from this past year, it should be maybe we should pay more attention to black folks, and specifically to black women, when they try to warn us about things or tell us about things from their perspective, because we ignore them or push them off to the side far too often. So, Lady Columbia, and specifically Black by Any Means. It's an awesome show. Lady Columbia is an awesome channel, an awesome person. She deserves your attention just in general, but specifically Black by Any Means. Check it out. Lady Columbia, FoxyJazzabelle, and Ashleigh, ElectricMayhem87. That is the shout out. That is the final shout out of You Had to Ask. I also want to remind you for one final time on this series, although of course I will be bringing it up again and again in the future until we get to the actual event, that you can get your tickets for TAC, the Atheist Conference. It will take place in New York City, July 6th, 7th, and 8th in 2018 at the beautiful Roosevelt Hotel. You can go to theatheistconference.com to buy your tickets, to make your hotel reservations, to see a list of speakers that will be there at the show, including myself and including the aforementioned FoxyJazzabelle. She will be there. She'll actually be on stage with me as part of the YouTube panel that we are going to be convening, along with Christy Winters and the One Janitor and ContraPoints. And it's just going to be a fantastic show, a great time. Aaron Ra is going to be there. Mandisa Thomas is going to be there. Go check out the speakers list to see everybody who's going to be there. It's going to be terrific. And you can go to theatheistconference.com to get your tickets and make your reservations for TAC. And I hope I see a bunch of you there, July 6th, 7th, and 8th, 2018. Be there. I also want to remind you once again, for the very last time on this show, I want to remind you that my cat just left the room. See, I think it was nice of her to hang around as long as she did after I interrupted her little nap on the couch. I want to remind you, as I always do, to check out the Lemme Listen family of podcasts. These are podcasts that are created by my very good friend Jason Harding, and specifically check out the Late Seating podcast, which is a podcast that Jason co-hosts with me, where we take a fresh look at classic films that have reputations of either being really good or really bad. We review them, we summarize them, we make fun of them, we decide for ourselves whether they deserve whatever reputations they have. You can listen to our most recent episode, which is our special riff tracks style commentary track for Home Alone, where you watch your copy of Home Alone and you listen to our commentary along with it, and you get to hear us make fun of the movie and comment on the movie while you watch it. It's a lot of fun. It turned out really well. And you can also get ready for our next episode, which will go up next week, which is an episode I have been sort of dreading, but I've known it's coming for a long time, and I think it's best that we just rip the Band-Aid off and do it first thing in the new year. Our next new episode of Late Seating, which you can prepare for by watching the film ahead of the episode being released next week, will be our review of Peter Jackson's film of The Fellowship of the Ring. Not my favorite movie, not my favorite franchise, but we're going to review it, and who knows, maybe I will watch it for the first time in many years, and it'll turn out that I like it after all, just like what happened last year with It's a Wonderful Life. Who the hell knows? Probably not, but we'll see. But anyway, that's the next episode of Late Seating. For now, you can listen to the most recent episode and all of the past episodes and all of the episodes of all of the awesome Lemme Listen podcasts by going to LemmeListenPodcast.com. That's it for me, everybody. I am through. I've answered all the questions that I'm going to answer in this format. I am ready to wrap it up, but I recall a few minutes ago that Secular Scholar suggested maybe I should sing a little song to wrap up the show, and there's only one song that I can really think of, and it's the way that my favorite television personality ever used to end all of the episodes of his show. And it goes a little something like this. It's such a good feeling to know you're alive. It's such a happy feeling. You're growing inside, and when you wake up, ready to say, I think I'll make a snappy new day. Not that part for me. It's such a good feeling, a very good feeling, a feeling you know that I'll be back when the year is new to answer more questions in live streams with you, because you'll have things you'll want to talk about. I will too. You make every day a special day. You know how? By just you being you. So keep that up, will you? And keep asking me questions for me to answer in the new year on the live streams. The first one has been scheduled. The first Ask Away live stream that will succeed this series will take place live Monday, January 8th, starting at 6 p.m. So prepare to be there with me live, or just watch it once it's archived after the live stream is over. Either way, you can ask me a question for that first Ask Away live stream by just leaving a comment on this video. Ask me a question not for the next You Had to Ask, but for the first Ask Away live stream. Leave a comment on this video asking me your question that I will answer on the first episode of the live stream coming up January 8th. And then from there on, you can just ask questions on the comments of the previous live stream, etc., etc. I'll explain this all on the air on January 8th. But thank you all so much for being with me, for watching all of these shows, for asking so many questions, so many awesome questions, and for showing up to hear my answers. I can't tell you how much I appreciate it. And I can't tell you how excited I am to keep it going in a new format in the Ask Away live streams starting in a couple of weeks. So be well, everybody. Thanks for watching. Thanks for asking. I'll see you January 8th for the new iteration of this whole question and answer thing that we've done. And until then, take care, everybody.